I said, can I ask you something? How does an obviously very nervous, very shy 15-year-old go from not telling anyone she's singing to being on a national television show and being a semifinalist?
Yeah.
How did you do that? And she said she decided one day that she wanted to sing more than she wanted to be afraid.
You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the show where we hold the space for successful women in Hollywood to tell their stories. This week I got to speak with Jill Danyenica. She's an artist, an editor, and a director. And I gotta tell you, we talked for hours. So the fact that I could edit this down to a little bit more than an hour, I think is a huge victory. So hang in there, I think it's worth it. Jill has edited Undercovers, Hollywood Heights, The Division, Switched at Birth, and then got to direct Switched at Birth, and also her independent film, Life Inside Out. You can reach us at theother50%.com. You can follow us on iTunes. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter. So here's Jill. Okay, so why don't we start with what do you do?
I am a film editor and director. I work mainly in television editorial.
How did you get to this point? Start at the very beginning.
I was raised in the back rooms of my parents' and family's restaurants. And they didn't put me to work in the front until I was 11. And so until then, me and my brother would watch television and play games in the back rooms of the restaurants. So we would read comic books and books and stories and watch tons and tons of television. That's the beginning of my love of narrative, is all the books I read. I always had a book in my hand. But I had, from early on, wanted to be a visual artist. So that I went to art school.
Where'd you go?
I went to UCLA as an undergrad and actually dropped out of the art major and became a history major.
What prompted that?
I was in the art school, and I felt like they were giving me a lot of freedom to do whatever I wanted, but I had no grounding for it. And so I felt very awash.
Yeah.
And so I went into the design department, and they gave me a lot of skills, but there was no conceptual yumminess there.
Yeah, interesting.
So I was unhappy in both of those departments at the time. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be an artist, I need to understand my place in the world. And so I thought I would create my own major, and I went through the catalog and started circling classes I would be interested in taking to sort of propose a major to the college. And when I got to the history department, I was circling every class. So I became a history major, and I focused on cultural and intellectual history. And that was my undergraduate degree. And then I went to art school for graduate school.
Where'd you go for graduate school?
Claremont, the Claremont Graduate University. And there I focused on installation art. While I was at graduate school, I met another artist who, actually it was right before graduate school, and we were both going to the same school. We were in a painting class together at Otis. And she brought her paints into class in a film canister. And I said, oh, do you work in the film industry? And she said, yeah, I'm in editorial. And I became very interested, even though I had no idea. I didn't even know what a director did, let alone what an editor did. But I hounded her for the 2 years of graduate school to find me a job in editorial when we graduated, because we were being schooled that there would be no jobs as professors when we got out, as art professors. Well, you know, they were training us to become gallery artists, and hopefully...
Yeah.
But I wasn't interested in making art that was... The art I made wasn't easily commodifiable.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not interested in making art that was easily commodifiable.
This is the crux of the artist.
Right. But I had to find a way to feed myself.
Uh-huh.
And so I hounded her about going into editorial, even though I didn't know what it was. So she, after we graduated, she said, if you move to LA, I will set up a couple interviews with you with friends of mine. And so I moved to LA. And the first interview I had, he asked me, why do you want to be an editor? And I didn't know, because I didn't know anything about editing. And he said, you need to take a class.
Yeah. What kind of job were you interviewing for? Like, had you ever seen the software?
No, nothing. I knew nothing. So I took this class at UCLA Extension on basically being an assistant editor. And it taught you the basics. And it was the very tail end of film. The very
Yeah, were you still splicing?
It was the last 2 minutes of film. So I learned film. And my first job was at Roger Corman Studios in Venice. And within 3 days of working at Roger Corman, I knew more than I had known for weeks in the class. Like,
Yeah.
I totally got it, just the practical experience of being in the editing room. And I think at the time I was making little rolls for movie. They were still cutting on a moviola.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 35 millimeter film on a moviola. I was an assistant editor. And then the assistant on that job got an editing job. And he brought me on as his assistant. And that was on a Chem 16 millimeter film. So I had a little synchronizer, and I was sending 16 millimeter film and sound mag track through and making sure it was all in sync.
Yeah.
And was splicing it with tape.
So
and
your
a
gesture
splicer.
is you're turning a crank.
Oh yeah, I'm Italian, so I've got the hand gestures. I'm turning the crank of the synchronizer. And I did that. And then my next job was digital.
Boom.
I mean, that was it. Film died. And I had friends that were really sad when, digital sort of overtook film.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, hooray, this is great. I feel like I was in a good position because I got that 10 minutes of working in film.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood when we transitioned to digital what the terminology was.
Right.
What
What a great education.
a splice was, what a cut was. I knew physically what that was,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't care about it. And I could move on to the digital computer-based editing systems.
Okay, so the switch to digital.
So the switch to digital.
How'd you
happened-
learn it? Like, everyone must have been learning it at the same time.
Yeah, which was great.
Yeah.
Because nobody was an expert. So I think my first job was it was an independent feature, and the editor and I, neither one of us, I think, knew digital, so they paid for us to take a class on Avid.
Yeah.
And we took the Avid class, and then I showed up for the job on the first day, and the job had been canceled. It was a low-budget indie feature. I don't know what happened. But they had paid for a really expensive class on digital editing.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So so that's how I learned the Avid. I think there might have been a couple systems that was pretty much the only one I learned in the beginning.
Okay, so then what kind of jobs did you get after that?
I made my days working non-union. Had to work 100
What kind of projects?
independent films.
Okay.
So I worked 100 days non-union with pay stubs and producers' letters, and then I immediately marched over to the Editors Guild because my job, my idea at the time was I wanted a good paying job with benefits,
Yeah.
so that I could keep making my art.
Smart.
And I got into the union as an assistant editor, and the first job I got was this awesome job on the Warner Brothers lot. I was an apprentice editor in the film traffic department, and my entire job was to ride around the lot on a bicycle, delivering tapes and DVDs and paperwork and elements to executives and editors and producers around the lot. So I got to know the entire lot, got to know all the executives, all their assistants, all the shows. It was so fun.
Yeah.
It was great. And so the great job, sort of at a certain point, it was like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm done.
But what a great experience.
Oh, it was awesome. Every day was amazing. The lot is beautiful. It's like a college campus.
Mm-hmm.
It's still my favorite lot in Hollywood. Like, it's
Well,
just,
Stars Hollow is there. How can you go
oh
wrong?
my gosh, it's just amazing. It's an amazing lot, and like literally to walk past Mr. Eastwood walking past me with his entourage of people, like, oh my goodness.
Mind blowing.
And it's happened several times to me. It happened even a couple of months ago. Mr. Eastwood walking past me, like, so I love the lot, and it was fantastic. The only time it wasn't was on a rainy day when I still had to get on the bicycle and deliver those elements.
Well, that happens once every 2 years.
Exactly.
So, okay.
So who cares? But anyway, I was ready to move on, and I was already an assistant in the union, and so I started getting assisting jobs. And I think my first little ones here and there on pilots, and then my first full-time series was a Lifetime series called The Division, and I was the assistant editor. That was my first opportunity to cut. So I was the assistant editor, and assistant editors, what they do is they organize all the material for the editors and for post, for it to go on to the next stages of the production process. And but I was always editing scenes on my own. I was, first of all, sitting in the room behind the editor, watching everything she did, like a hawk. So I really was getting my education in how you edit by watching a very fine editor do her work. When she was let go, then I stayed on the job, and I worked with the next editor, once again sitting behind him watching what he did. So now I had the experience of watching two different people's processes very closely.
Great.
And I was cutting recaps. Recaps are the previously on.
Yeah.
Right? And that is a great experience because you have to cull through all that footage of 40 minutes or maybe several episodes and turn it into a 30-second piece of information that lets you know everything you need to know so that you can follow along with this particular episode that you're about to see.
That's an exercise.
It's quite an exercise. It is quite a skill to have. And by the time I was done with the division, I think I'd cut almost every one of those recaps. And cutting scenes along the way, whether the editor would throw me a bone and say, go ahead, you cut it. There was one particular scene where it's female cops, and they're in a bar, and a cop shows up to give one of them a ticket. And she says, what are you talking about? My car isn't illegally parked. And he turns out to be an exotic dancer. And so he strips off his clothes, and the male editor said, I don't want to cut this. I was like, I'll do it. Jumped in the other room, and I cut this really fun dance sequence of this stripper cop.
Oh, fun.
So that was maybe one of the first scenes I had cut for the show. And then I got the opportunity to cut. By the time the show was over, I think I had cut 4 episodes and been an additional editor on several more.
Great.
But then it was a long process because it was probably close to the last 10 years where I've jumped back and forth between assisting and editing, and editing, dropping out of TV to cut independent features, going back into TV to assist, getting a job to edit. It was just this bouncing back and forth. It was not a clear path straight.
Yeah, is it hard to make that leap and then have it stick?
Sometimes, and sometimes not. Everybody has a different path. Mine happened to be what I felt like very frustrating and very difficult, banging my head against a wall.
What do you think it was?
I have no idea. Some of the, a lot of it could have been that I was on series that, like, the division wound up being canceled, and there was no new show from that executive producer, so I had to go find another job. Mm-hmm. And when you have 4 episodes of TV on your resume, that's not necessarily the best calling card for the next editing job. And then at Warner Brothers, because I knew all the people at Warner Brothers, and I was sort of their go-to girl for helping out when things got rough, especially during sweeps week when things would get very chaotic in the editing rooms. And I think at the time they were doing a schedule where it was 2 assistants, 2 editors for every series. But they made a point of hiring a 3rd editor and 3rd assistant to help when things got crazy. And I happened to be that 3rd assistant on a bunch of different shows at Warner Brothers. I would just bounce around the lot. And I was asked to come in and fill in for an assistant who couldn't for 3 weeks on J.J. Abrams' Undercovers. And I showed up, and it was a really low-key editor who didn't ask a lot of me as his assistant. And so I was done with my work by noon every day. The show hadn't started to heat up. Believe me, that wasn't the way it was in the end. But in the beginning, when it was just starting, there wasn't a lot of work to do. And so I was sitting there, and one of the editors had been let go, and all of her dailies were piling up because they hadn't hired another editor. And so,
okay, throw me in.
No, I didn't even ask. I just started cutting them.
There you go.
I cut all the dailies, and the supervising editor producer came in and said, "Are you cutting dailies?" And I said, "Yeah." I didn't ask if it was okay.
Yeah, ask for forgiveness, not for permission.
Exactly. And then he walked out, and then he walked back in, and I said, "Do you have any notes for me?" Is what I said. I don't know where I got the balls for this. Do you have any notes for me?
I love it.
And he said, "Just make sure when they speak that they're on camera, that the lines aren't off camera."
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Okay," and I kept cutting. And then I rallied to get that job.
I was going to say, did you then have a conversation of, I'm doing the job, how about I get the title and the salary?
Yeah, well, they hired somebody else to do that job, so to be the 3rd editor.
Okay.
But they were still swimming, and it was just a crazy show. And they were still swimming in dailies, and so I rallied to get a 4th editor position. I said, "You need me. I can do this. I am doing this. You need to keep me on as the 4th editor." And I rallied up to the vice president of post-production at Warner Brothers.
Good for you.
And so he finally said, I said, "You need to keep me on." And he said, "Well, we don't really need a 4th assistant editor yet, but when we do in a couple of weeks, I'll call you." And I said, no, not 4th assistant editor, 4th editor. And the editor that I was standing with when I said that went, I don't know where it came from. I am never that bold. But 4 weeks later, he called me up and he said, "Okay, show up to work. You're the 4th editor."
That is fantastic. What made you do that?
I don't know. I think I had just read Seth Godin's book, Lynchpin.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of this book? it's a book where he uses the term artist metaphorically, but since I'm a visual artist, I took it very literally. And he says, in any job that you do, whether you are a CEO or a barista, make sure that you are a linchpin, not a cog in the wheel, but a linchpin. Do your job well, and do your job as an artist would, with creativity and thinking outside the box. And that book empowered me so much. And
I'll say.
And I had just finished reading it, so that was all soup in my head.
You're like, I own this.
I totally can do this. Because I am not that bold. I am not that bold.
Except that you are.
Except that I am. I guess I am. So so they hired me, and my job was to cut dailies so that the editors could continue to... The way television works is that as one episode is being shot, there is one editor assigned to that episode, and he or she is cutting the scenes as they come in, cutting the dailies as they come in. And then when the shoot is over, after 7 to 9 days, then another episode is being shot. And the second editor is doing those dailies. Mm-hmm. And then a third episode is being shot, and a third editor is cutting those dailies. By the time the fourth episode is being shot, the first editor is cutting those again.
Because they got to be done by now.
They have to be done, well, because they cut the dailies, and then it goes through several stages. It goes editor's cut, and then the director comes in for several days to give his or her notes. So you have a director's cut. Then the producers come in for several days and give their notes, producer's cut. Then the studio weighs in, and then the network weighs in. Then after the network weighs in and you do those notes, you lock the cut. And locking the cut means the picture won't change, and you send it off to sound and color and visual effects to be completed before it airs on television.
How long does that whole process take?
So that whole process takes about a month. So that's why you need at least 3 editors working on a series, because you can do notes while you're also cutting dailies on the next episode, but it can get a little bit tricky. If it's particularly like Undercovers was a very visual effects heavy show, a lot of action. And so what was happening is work was building up. Mm-hmm. So my job, they sat me in an editing room and they said, cut as many dailies as you can. So every day from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, I sat there and I cut the dailies so that then the editors could take them and they could recut them to make their editor cut.
But the scenes were already there, so they can assemble and refine it.
I cut the scenes, and then they could say, no, I want to be in a close-up there, I want to take another take there, I didn't like that performance, whatever it was. But at least I gave them a base to work from instead of having to cull through everything, which is very time-consuming. Because when you're shooting, you shoot the same scene several times from several different angles. So for a 2-minute scene, you could have, 20 minutes of footage, a half hour of footage, and you have to watch all of that, make notes on it, and then decide which piece of footage you're going to use for which piece of the scene. And all of that is very, very...
That can take hours.
Yeah. I've done 2-minute scenes in a half an hour, and just recently I did a 2-minute scene that took me 6 hours. You never know, depending on what particular problems are inherent in the scene. And it's not necessarily because it's complex and there's a lot of footage. Sometimes it's just a continuity problem that you're dealing with, or actors that can't quite remember their lines, so you have to cut around them when they stumble. So it's just technical things. Sometimes the hardest thing for me to do is get somebody through a door.
Really?
Yeah. The drama, the high drama, the action, the gunshots, fine. Getting that person through the door for the action to begin sometimes stymies me. Just who do I want to be on? Do I want to be outside the door while they're knocking, or do I want to be inside the door as they open the door and reveal, I'll just sit there. So
many choices.
Yeah, there's endless choices. There's no right answer. And so...
That's where the art comes in.
Yeah. So anyway, but... so that's the long answer to how I got sort of the trajectory into editing.
So then you were an editor.
I thought.
And then what happened?
Then I was out of work for 10 months.
What happened?
Because Undercovers got canceled, and I thought, well, I cut for J.J. Abrams. I'm on my way.
That's your ticket.
That's my ticket. But I still didn't have the resume that a lot of other editors have. And so I went back to assisting for a little bit, I think, and I also cut independent things again. And then I was watching with my daughter this new television show at the time on ABC Family called Switched at Birth. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I thought it was this beautifully written, amazing. I loved the way they treated So Switched at Birth has a lot of deaf characters as central to the storyline. And in every episode that I watched, there was at least one scene that was entirely in ASL, American Sign Language. And in those scenes, the way they treated them was that everything went silent. Everything. There was no background noise. There was no music. It was just silence. And you just were there watching the ASL.
Yeah.
And I thought it was treated in such a sophisticated manner. It was so beautiful. And the acting and the storylines were so resonant to me that I did something I've never done before. I wrote a love letter. I wrote a fan letter, and I sent it to the head of ABC Family Post-Production, who was the only person I knew that was even tangentially related to the show.
And did you know that person?
I had sent my resume to him through the internet. I had never met him, but you send off your resume to all the post-production supervisors and all the post-production vice presidents in town. So I wrote him this letter saying, please, please pass my regards on to the producers of the show. This is just so lovely. And thank you. Just tell them thank you, thank you, thank you. And
I felt the same way about that show.
Right?
Yeah.
Amazing. And he called me or emailed me back, and he said, yeah, we've been getting a lot of good feedback on the show, and by the way, they need an editor. Would you like to go and interview? And I said, yes.
Was that your intention when you sent the letter?
No.
Or it was just I love it?
I was just being a fangirl. I mean, yeah, I wanted a job, but I wasn't even thinking that because
that's not how it happens.
It's not how it happens, and the show was already on, so I figured they had their crew.
Yeah.
Right? I was not for a second thinking that. I just wanted to express my love. And when he said, do you want to go in an interview?
Yes.
Yes. And I went into the first interview, and I was a blathering fangirl because I think that the executive producer said to me, the showrunner, Paul Stupin, said to me, how do we find you here today? He was looking at my resume, my sort of not so full resume. How do we find you here? You seem intelligent and capable, but you don't have a lot of experience.
How did this happen?
How did this happen? And I told him about how much of a fan I was of the show. And then I also said, if you hire me, I don't have as much experience as an editor as a lot of the candidates you're probably interviewing, but I've been an assistant for all these years, and I've cut independent features, and I am very fast, and I'm very good. And you will not regret hiring me if you do. And please check my references. And he said, oh, yes, I will. And within 5 minutes, my references were calling me saying, oh, we just got a phone call.
Wow.
And then I was asked to come in and speak to the creator of the show, Lizzie Weiss. And as I was walking into her office for the interview, Paul and Lizzie's executive assistant said, be a fangirl like you were in the first interview. So she gave me a little hint.
She tipped you off.
Because I thought I had been over the top with it. I really was gushing because I really did love the show and wanted them to know whether I got the job or not, how much I appreciated it. And so, of course, it was easy for me to tell Lizzie how much I loved her work.
Because it's true.
Because it was absolutely true. And I was fortunate enough to be hired. And then
I love this story.
And I had 5 of the best years of my life working on that show.
Oh, you did it for 5 years.
I did it for 5 seasons. 5 seasons. Amazing show, amazing crew, amazing editors, amazing directors. It was incredible. And it was a really interesting show to cut as well because everything, sort of the tricks that editors use, you can't use in a show where people are deaf.
Ooh, like what?
For instance, a lot of editing is cued by the eyes. So if there's a knock on the door and you're the actor in the scene, there's a knock on the door, your eyes will move toward the door. And that will tell me, the editor, let your eyes move toward the door. Now I'm going to cut to the door, to the picture of the door.
Yeah.
Well, when people are deaf, they don't hear the door, the knock on the door.
Right.
So I had to find other ways, or for instance, often in cutting, you'll be looking at one person talking, and then someone else in the group talks, and once again, their eye moves to that person. So once the eye moves, then I cut to that other person speaking.
So you don't have those cues at all?
You can't, because the deaf person can't hear the person starting to speak. So you have to find another way around it so that the eyes don't cue the sound.
So what would you do, for example?
So if there's 3 people speaking in a room, and I am speaking to you, the deaf character, and someone else starts to speak, and I'm hearing. I would go from the deaf character looking at me to me, the hearing person, who turns to the person who's speaking to get the eye line that way. So deaf character to hearing person looks to the speaking person to.
So you have to be really conscious of all those.
Yeah, very conscious.
So interesting.
Yeah. And also, you often, to compress time in editing, you'll put part of someone's dialogue under another character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't really do that when a deaf person is speaking, because then you can't see what they're saying.
Right.
So you're on them longer, and you can't compress time in those ways. You have to be on them the entire time they're speaking, or you've cut off their language.
You have to let them finish.
And cutting ASL is like cutting a dance sequence. It's very, for me, it was choreographed, because when I started the show, I didn't speak ASL, and so I had to just memorize the movements.
Mm-hmm.
And
all right, because you're not looking at captions when you're editing.
No,
it.
I have no captions. I have a script. And I have the script is written in English, of course. And so I'm reading the script and I'm looking at them. And sometimes their mouths are moving a little bit, like, so I can sort of, and it was just memorizing the choreography in the beginning. And then also when you want to cut stuff out to make the show come to time, because every episode has to be 43 minutes long, right? So if you've got a 50-minute episode, you have to cut 7 minutes out. And so then that was when I really had to start to understand ASL. When is the end of that line?
Yeah.
When does he start saying this other thing that I think I can cut out? Like,
so how did that affect your speed? Because you were bragging about your speed
when
you got the job.
The ASL scenes did take a little longer. Not much, but yeah, they did take a little longer, because you can't cue by sound.
Yeah. So then did you go and learn ASL?
I did.
Yeah, you'd have to, I would think.
I did. I'm still not as good as my 11-year-old now, but she's much better at ASL than I am.
Well, kids are very fast with languages.
They are very fast with languages.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's
now, would you do other jobs in between seasons?
Yeah, so actually in between Freeform, now it was ABC Family, now it's Freeform, they tend to divide their shows into two parts in terms of working.
Mm-hmm.
So
like
you'll
two sets of 10 episodes?
Yeah. So you'll work for 4 months on the first 10, and then you'll have a hiatus of a couple of months, and then you'll work on the next 10.
Oh.
And so actually, I think the first hiatus I worked on another television show for a couple months. But by the second hiatus, I was prepping my feature to direct a feature. And so in between working Switched at Birth, I prepped and directed and edited and posted and went to a bunch of film festivals with my independent feature.
Okay, tell us all about that.
So my feature is called Life Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was written by the star and co-star of the movie, Maggie Baird and Laurie Nasso. And it's about a middle-aged woman who has 3 teenage sons, who's she's been a mother, and she's worked for her family, and she's looking for something in her life. Mm. And she discovers her old guitar hidden under her bed, and takes it out and tentatively starts to go to open mic nights and play and write music again. Mm. And in the process of going, she drags along her sullen, troubled youngest son, who doesn't want to be there. But something sparks in him, and he discovers his own love and facility for music, and he starts to play as well. So that's the crux of the movie.
I love it.
It's lovely. It's a lovely movie. Maggie and Laurie wrote a beautiful movie. And then Maggie starred in the movie with her own teenage son.
Oh.
So part of the reason why we had to prep it so quickly and shoot it so quickly is that Phineas was growing, and he was going to grow out of the role. The role was for a 14-year-old, and he was sprouting up.
So you're like, now.
We have to do it now. We have to do it this summer.
So did you always want to direct? How did you know you were going to do that?
You know, Maggie and I met at a La Leche League meeting when our kids were babies. Mm-hmm. And we became fast friends, and we also homeschooled our oldest children together. And all of those years, when we were struggling trying to find jobs, we would say to each other, we should just make a movie.
Yeah.
But we have all the friends that do all the things in the movies. Like, we just need a script.
Right.
We just need a script. And 14 years later, Maggie had written the script.
Oh, how great.
So
how'd you get the money?
We kickstarted it. And we asked for $35,000 because we thought with $35,000 we can make the movie on our iPhones, and it'll be like a home movie, but it'll be a movie. Because when you create a Kickstarter campaign, you are pledging to do what you say you're going to do.
Uh-huh.
So we knew if we asked for money, we would have to make the movie. So we asked for an amount that was high enough that we could make something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you ask for too little money, you're not going to be able
can't
to
do anything.
So we asked for $35,000, and we wound up making 41 off Kickstarter. And with that, I think that really empowered other people to invest in the movie because they saw how well we ran our Kickstarter campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we finished the Kickstarter campaign in June, and in August we were shooting.
And did you shoot it on your iPhones?
No, we got enough money. So our producer, Tessa Bell, was not very interested in shooting a movie on iPhones. It was before Tangerine came out, which was shot all on iPhones.
Uh-huh.
Tessa really wanted to actually shoot, a movie that had a little more production value, is what she thought. And good for her. So we raised the extra money. She came up with a budget, and she said that we needed more, and we got the investors to give us the money. We shot on the Red Epic. And one camera, our cinematographer, Guido Frenzel, shot the entire movie with the Red Epic. We had 2 cameras in the club scenes. So that was a Red Scarlet. Mm-hmm. But other than the club scenes, we only had 1 camera for the entire shoot. And the entire shoot was 15 and a half days.
Did you do it in LA?
We did it in LA, Monrovia.
And then how did it do?
So we finished the movie, and the movie did extraordinary. We finished the movie, and we had our premiere at the Heartland Film Festival in October of 2013. Mm-hmm. We won Best Premiere and the Crystal Heart Award for a narrative feature. And then we went on to screen at 20 more film festivals. We won 5 Best Feature awards and 4 or 5 audience awards. We won something like 15 or 16 awards in total. Best music.
Incredible.
Best actor for Phineas. Best script.
Wait a minute, but it was a female project with a female-driven lead, directed by a female. How could that be successful?
And you know what's funny? I didn't get into any of the female film festivals I applied to.
What?
Yes, none of them.
Oh, how weird.
I applied to all these women's film festivals. Part of the attraction for hiring me as the director for this movie, I think, for the producer, was that, well, it'll get some traction because it's a female director. And
yeah.
No, that wasn't a factor at all. No, we didn't get into any of the festivals that are focused on female filmmakers.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, we got into other amazing festivals, Cleveland and Phoenix, and really wonderful local festivals like Woods Hole and San Luis Obispo, and like I said, 21. Oh,
yeah. Did you go to all of them?
Well, there were certain points in our festival year where we were in 3 festivals in the same weekend.
Oh.
So we had to divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So Maggie would go to one, Tessa would go to one, I would go to another.
While your show was going on?
Yeah.
So was you like, I got to go for the weekend?
No, it just so happened, strangely enough, that pretty much for every festival, I was on hiatus. So I was able to go to all of the festivals and experience all that wonderful, for me as a visual artist, It was like having an art opening. I wanted to go to those festivals. I wanted to screen our movie for audiences and get their reactions and talk to them and have those question and answers after all of our hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It was really a labor of love for everybody. And after all of our hard work, I wanted to have the experience of watching other people experience the movie. Mm-hmm. And so I was really the pushing for the festival experience. And I got to go to a lot of them.
So great. Did it get distribution?
Yeah, so after our festival run, we had a limited theatrical release for 2 weeks, mainly in LA and New York. We showed at the Laemmle Pasadena, and it was extended, so we played there for 2 weeks. We played in New York for a week, San Diego, and West Virginia. And then we got distribution through Monarch Home Entertainment, and it's now on DVD and VOD on all sorts of platforms. We let it go after that. Now it's out there. It has its own life.
Now, have you directed since then?
Yes, I actually I directed a PSA for the LA Food Bank, which was very fun with my cinematographer Guido Frenzel. We had a great time, and then I got an opportunity in the 5th and final season of Switched at Birth. I directed the penultimate episode of Switched at Birth.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I had been asking for several, as soon as I finished my movie, I had asked. And
How does that conversation go? How do you do that?
the conversation goes, you schedule a meeting. You know, you don't do it in your editing suite when they're sitting there with other things on their mind. You actually ask their executive assistant to schedule a 10-minute block of time.
May I have a moment?
May I have a moment of your time? And you sit there and you present your case, just like a job interview. And so I spoke to Paul Stupin, our executive producer, I think starting right after my movie was completed. And I said, I did this independent feature. I would love an opportunity to direct for you. I think I could do a really good job. You know, I know and love these characters. And I would love it if you would give me that opportunity, and I think I could do a wonderful episode for you. And Paul demurred. He didn't say no. He said, probably you'll need to shadow first. And so I shadowed Norman Buckley, who's a wonderful television director. And then at the end of the season, I said, okay, so I'd like to direct. And Paul demurred for a couple of seasons. And finally, and I kept having those meetings with him at the end of every season, the 10-minute meeting. Until finally one time he said, you don't have to tell me anymore. I know you want to direct. And I said, no, I have to tell you because I need to tell you.
Yeah.
I need to feel like I've done everything I can to state the case that I'd really like to direct for you. And then we got picked up for season 5, and I got a phone call from Paul and Lizzie both on the phone, and they said, we just want to let you know that you're going to be directing episode 9 of season 5.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, I was so excited. And
So that took years
yeah, that took,
from the first ask.
yes, it took, I believe, 3 seasons from the first ask.
Now, can you kind of walk us through how being an editor translates into being a director?
Okay, so as an editor, what I'm seeing is the finished product from the set. Now, the nice thing about being an editor, what I appreciate about editors and being an editor, I don't like going down on the set when they're shooting. I like seeing the film. I don't even look at the notes that the script supervisor has written, first off. I watch it all and I make notes on it, just watching what I have in front of me. I don't know the drama that happened on the set. I don't know how long it took to get that shot. I don't know who was causing trouble and who wasn't. And I also don't know what the director and script supervisor and producers thought was the best take.
So you have no baggage looking at it.
Exactly. I have no baggage. I'm just looking at the footage in front of me in that frame. And based on that footage, I make my notes. And then I'll go back and look at their notes. I'll cut my scene, and then I'll look at their notes and see if it's in line. And sometimes what they thought was the best take doesn't work. Sometimes it is the best take. Often it is. But often it doesn't work for continuity, or there's something a little magical that maybe they didn't see because you're looking at so many things when you're on the set.
Where are they putting their notes? On the script?
In the script.
So the script supervisor and the director are writing notes?
Yeah, the script supervisor is writing all the
script.
notes. So you've got a script, and on what's called facing pages, so the script is only one-sided, and on the page that faces the dialogue that's being shot, the scene that's being shot, the script supervisor is writing all sorts of notes. What the scene is, what the camera set up, the kind of camera they shot it with, whether the take was complete or not, whether there was a flub, if the director had any specific notes about it, if they made a change in dialogue. So that's all written on the facing page.
Oh, I didn't realize they put that level of detail.
Yeah, so it's a Bible for the editors.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for the work that the script supervisors do, because
So they just hand it over to you?
yeah. So not only are they in charge of continuity, you picked up that cup with your right hand. So in the other coverage, pick it up with your right hand again. They're in charge of that level of detail and continuity. They're also in charge of writing down all of those notes about what that particular shot was, the focal length of the lens, the length of the take, whether it was complete or not, whether there were flubs, maybe it goes in the gag reel, and whether or not which take the director liked the best.
So everybody's talking to the script supervisor. So the camera person is saying, I'm using a blah, blah, blah on here. Well, I got to talk to a script supervisor.
Yes, it's an interesting job. And the script supervisor is calling out the setups. Okay, so this is scene 10, take 1. The next setup has to have a different name. That's 10A, take 1, take 2, take 3. So I see all this footage, and I'm making all these assessments. And also, what is it called? Monday morning quarterbacking a lot? which is totally unfair. But I'm saying, why didn't they get this other shot? If they had just moved the camera this 6 inches, I would have had the angle.
Yeah.
And it's really unfair. And once you're on the set as a director, you realize why you didn't get that other shot or why the camera couldn't be moved. And you. I have one friend who had been an editor and became a director, and she said to me, right after she directed her first episode of television, she called every director she had ever worked with as an editor and apologized for any mean things she had ever said to them.
It is harder than you think.
Because she realized. And I think she said that to me in response to me saying to her, why didn't you get me that shot you told me you were going to get? You told me you were going to get this shot, and I was looking for it in the dailies, and it wasn't there, so she told me this story. Because as an editor, I can sit there all night. If I'm having trouble with a scene, I can stay all night. It's my room. It's my time. It's my computer.
It's not costing you $10,000 an hour.
I have worked on one 3-minute scene for 12 hours one time because it was just a scene that caused trouble. Mm-hmm. And I could do that. I had the luxury of doing that. As a director, you have the time you have.
Yeah.
You've got 12 hours, and that's it. And then everybody has to go home, or you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So you don't have the luxury that the editor has in the So that's an aside as well. But
perspective,
exactly. But going over all this footage and making my choices, I think I have a deficit as a editor directing in that I haven't spent a lot of time on set. Mm-hmm. But what I have as an asset is knowing what I need.
Yeah.
And I know when I've got it. I can look at those monitors, I can watch the performances, and I know I've got it. Let's move on. Or I know when continuity is important and when it isn't. I've had people say, we have to rearrange the table, that's not the way it was. No, I don't need it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, because I in my head I'm already cutting it.
Right.
I know if an actor's having trouble with a line, when I can let it go, or when it's, no, I really need to have that.
Finish it.
I have to finish that line.
Because you can see the final,
I can see
how
it
it's
in my
put
head.
together.
Yeah.
So the shadowing, I imagine, was for, here's how it all works on set. Because you just can't walk onto a set for the first time and direct.
Yeah, and what an education. Well, I did actually, on my feature.
Oh, true.
When I walked onto the set for my feature the first day, that was pretty much the first time I'd ever walked on a set.
Okay, so how'd you figure it out?
Trial and error. I got to be 100% better director every day that I was on my set. And the first 3 days of the shoot, I thought Guido was going to kill me because he spent a lot of time yelling at me.
About what?
Everything. An angle that I wanted, the fact that I would say what was one classic one? Oh, okay, here's the classic one that I won. I didn't win all of them. But this one was, I wanted a shot under the bed. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be looking under the bed at Laura, the character, going through the contents under her bed, very messy under the bed, and pulling the guitar out of the way, the guitar case out of the way. And Guido looks under the bed and he says, it's dark under there, I can't see anything. And I said, okay, well, light it.
Yeah.
And he said, where's the light coming from? And I said, the light's coming from wherever you put the light.
It's not what he meant, I don't think.
No, that's not what he meant. And I'm sure he wasn't happy with me. But I said, no one is going to question where the light's coming from when we see it. Because knowing an editorial, no one's going to question it.
Right.
I promise you.
And there wasn't a window behind
Exactly. So I won that one, but he won plenty. Where one time I wanted a certain angle in the room, and he looked at me and he said, how am I going to shoot that? And I said, stand here. And he said, these aren't removable walls, Jill. This is a practical set. There's no room for me in the camera. Like, come on. So that was my deficit.
Right.
So there were constant discussions about what we needed and didn't need and where the camera should go and not go, and very collaborative.
How did you prepare to do that? Like, how'd you prepare every day for directing the next day?
I didn't have a lot of prep time. I only had 3 weeks before the shoot. So Guido and I went to a lot of movies together and talked about shots and ways of shooting and looks, because we were trying to work out what the look of the feature would be. Mm-hmm. And I think at first I was excited about Guido because he shoots a lot of run and gun, handheld, and he can just search out the scene. He's done a lot of reality television. He's very fast. And I was excited about that, but he wanted to sort of lock that camera down a little bit more and shoot it a little more traditionally. And he's the cinematographer, and I wanted to give him what he wanted.
Yeah.
And so we had a bunch of discussions about that, what camera we were going to use. And then in the end, we sort of ran up against time. And so what we did is we we read the script together, and for every scene, we both wrote down one still image. If we had to distill the scene into one image, what would it be? And we wrote it down, and then we compared our images to each other. For instance, that Maggie reaching under the bed for the guitar. We would write them down, and then I had a list. And every day on the set, my goal was just in that scene to get to that image at some point in the scene. So my shot list had to create a way that I could get that picture at one point.
How interesting.
And it was a good shorthand. And
did your ideas match?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, we would talk about, and when they didn't, often he'd show me one and I go, oh, that's way better. Let's use yours. Let's do that. That sounds great.
So it was really collaborative.
Yeah, very collaborative. Everybody. Maggie was not just the star of the movie and the writer of the movie. She was also producing the movie. It was her house that we were shooting in. We were all wearing many hats and we were all collaborating.
Yeah.
So I say it's our movie. It's not my movie. It was our movie because there were 5 principal people that were pushing this thing forward and wearing more hats than anyone should have to on a film shoot.
Yeah.
To get it done.
Well, what a wonderful experience.
And the crew was great. And I told them in the production meeting, look, we're not paying you enough to abuse you. And even if we were, it's not cool to abuse people on the set. So
what is the price of abuse?
Yeah, exactly. What is that
What's
price?
the going rate?
Yeah, because I'm not into it. And so I said, when problems come up, because problems will come up, that's just the nature of the beast. When problems come up, come to me, tell me what the problem is, and offer me a solution if you have one. I don't want to waste any time blaming anybody for the problem. Mm-hmm. Just tell me what it is and let's solve it.
Get on with it.
Get on with it. And everybody it was such a great feeling on the set. It was really warm and it was like a family. We all had so much fun, even though it was crazy long hours, and we did have tons of problems. But we just worked through them, and it was wonderful. It was such a great experience. Back to television. But yes, no, I didn't know how a television shoot is prepped and shot. Mm-hmm. It's a different beast altogether than an indie feature where you have all the control. Mm-hmm. And also, if there's a problem, in theory at least, you could maybe pick up a shot or you could go do reshoots. We didn't have the money or time for it, but in theory. So I was very fortunate to shadow Norman on Switched at Birth. And then I didn't shadow him on prep, just on the 7-day shoot. Mm-hmm. And then right before I shot my episode of Switched at Birth, I shadowed Alan Arkish, who's another very fine director. Mm-hmm. And I was able to hang out with him through prep and the shoot. And that was a real eye-opener to go to all the meetings, the production meeting, the location meeting, the technical scout, the wardrobe calls, and just watch him negotiate all these people coming into his prepping office, asking questions.
Every single piece
of the show. And that I had never experienced before. So I really enjoyed going through that process and seeing how it all came together in prep. And I think most of your work as a director should be done in prep. Mm-hmm. You should have it all worked out because, once again, problems will come up on the set. And the more prepared you are as a director when you walk on that set, the more gracefully you can make it through those problem areas. And also, the more time you'll have to make room for the magic that can happen on the set as well.
Yeah.
For those moments that you hadn't considered or didn't think of or just happen spontaneously, and you can say, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. And I have the time because I've prepped so well that I'm on schedule or ahead of schedule, so we have the time to get that shot.
Nice.
And when I got handed the outline for the script, I thought, oh my goodness, it was one of the most incredible scripts that I had read in the whole 5 seasons of that series, of a really amazing series. And I kept thinking to myself, don't mess this up, don't mess this up, don't mess this up.
What an honor and what a responsibility.
Exactly. What a responsibility. And I used my prep days and the weekend before and after, every single moment of every single one of those days, prepping that show so that I would not mess it up.
How'd it go?
It went great. It went great. Also, I have to say, in terms of someone to support you, what I did have is a really strong, really experienced first AD that was by my side the entire prep and then I even invited her into post. It was Val Finkel. And she was my ally. She got me the meetings I had to get. She got me down on the set when I needed to be down on the set. She answered all my questions. When I was getting a little too complex with some of my shot lists, she helped me hone it down and make it more streamlined. She was an amazing ally. And she also kept me on task when I was on the set, constantly telling me where I was with time. Okay, we're running a little behind, so let's try to wrap this up in the next 20 minutes. Oh, wow, we have a lot more time than I thought we would. You have an extra time if you want an extra shot. So she was constantly in my ear letting me know how I was doing in terms of the day, and that is
incredible.
Key. That's for any director. It's key to have a great AD next to you.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. I got every single special shot that I wanted. Part of the task of a television director is to deliver the show complete and on time, and hopefully add a little sparkle, a little bit that's your own, make it their show, but a little better.
Yeah.
Make it their show, but with a little different point of view.
Within that very tight framework.
Within that framework, right. And so I had planned, just like with my feature, I had planned some shots. And in my prep, I actually, because it makes more sense to my visual brain, instead of doing a shot list, I actually painted each of the shots that I wanted for every scene. And there were iconic shots that I wanted to get to in each scene. And I got every single one of them. I was able to get to every single one of them.
You painted them?
Well, it was a digital collage, but yeah. I went down on set and I took photographs of all the sets and all the angles that I wanted. And then I brought it back into my computer, and in Photoshop I embedded the actors in the places I wanted them in the furniture, and I made a collage out of it.
Oh,
and then
cool.
And then every morning I would hand it to the DP, who would look at it, sort of laugh and go, okay. And then I would sit behind my monitor and there would be my picture with the real actors.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was very fun. Yeah.
Okay, so what's next for you?
The day after I finished at Switched at Birth, I went on to Pretty Little Liars. And I am currently...
As an editor or director?
As an editor. And I'm currently cutting the series finale of that show. I'm in the middle of that right now.
Great.
Marlene King is directing it and I am editing. And then I have been accepted into the ABC Disney directing program. I'm one of their 10 directors for the next 2 years.
Fantastic.
So, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
So then will you get to do a bunch of different ABC shows?
I think that as part of the program, I'll be shadowing on 1 or 2 shows. And then hopefully getting a lot of meetings and meeting with people to direct my next episode of whatever that might be. So I'm really looking forward to continuing on directing. And I also love editing. I love it. I love the magic of it. I love sitting in that quiet room and editing. So I'm
Do you think you'll keep doing both, or do you want to transition into directing?
I love them both. I think I would love to transition into directing. And I'm also really happy as an editor.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. So
They're not. And I have several friends actually who direct and edit both, who just go back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think they both inform each other so well, both of those skills, both of those. I also I support my family. I am the breadwinner for my family.
Well, that was my next line of questions.
Go ahead.
We're going to go. And you have a daughter. You're a mother.
Yes, I have 2 daughters.
Oh, you have 2?
Yeah.
How old?
Just turned 11 and 18.
Oh, fantastic. Now, are you single or you have a partner?
I have a partner.
And how have you negotiated that with your family and your partner and separation of duties?
Well, when we had our first daughter, we sat down and looked at our lives and our work lives and our creative lives, because my husband is a musician and writer, and I'm a visual artist, and we decided that I was the one that had the job with the best income and benefits. And I also had the temperament to work outside the home.
Yeah.
So I was the one that was booted outside the house, and he raised our kid. So Michael's been the stay-at-home parent for all these years for our daughters, and I've been the one bringing home the paychecks, mainly.
And then how do you negotiate the home duties?
Well, everything sort of falls by the wayside. The place is always a mess. This is the cleanest. Michael's been on a roll lately, so this is the cleanest it's ever been. It's always chaos. We've got, especially when we were homeschooling our oldest daughter, there were projects on the kitchen table, there was paint downstairs, there was craziness everywhere, and, we just wade through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we basically, decided to let go of any need to have order in our lives so that we could raise happy kids and not be completely, feel like, Sisyphus
Yeah.
rolling the rock up the mountain.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's like when you got two little creative kids running around causing havoc in your life.
Yeah, and then the payoff is you get art and rich experiences and can live your life without having to worry about sweeping.
Yes. And we also have a very lovely woman that comes in once a week or once every 2 weeks to do the heavy lifting of cleaning for our place.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the floors wouldn't get mopped and the refrigerator wouldn't be cleaned out. And
It's
so,
hard to make it a priority when there's so much else going on.
Exactly. So thank goodness for her.
Yeah.
She does that for us.
Now, with you working the kind of hours you work, have you been able to be the kind of mother that you wanted to be?
When I went back to work the first time with my little 6-month-old baby left in my husband's arms, I cried every day.
Mm-hmm.
I cried every day.
I think we all did.
It was awful. It was awful. And
Yeah.
she was a very clingy kid. She always, literally, I'm not kidding, for the first 9 months of her life, she had to be in somebody's arms or she would scream bloody murder, including at night. I had to sleep with her on my chest. I slept on my back and she slept on my chest. So I was exhausted, as well as missing my baby. I was exhausted because what happened is I would go to work and she would nap with my husband all day. He would bring her up to Warner Brothers to nurse at lunchtime every day.
That was my next question, because I know you were breastfeeding.
Yeah, so she was nursing every day. And then he'd bring her back home. She'd fall asleep in the car, and she would sleep until I got home.
So she'd be up all night with
And then
you.
she'd be up all night ready to party with Mama. So she didn't even know I was gone. She was fine. I was exhausted.
Yeah, because then your bonding time is all night long.
Yeah, and so I
had
wasn't
that too with my
sleeping.
kids.
Oh my God, it was crazy.
Were you pumping also?
I was pumping also at work.
While you were editing.
Yes, I was an apprentice editor at the time. So no, they were very cool about it.
Yeah.
And I would, we would sit at the commissary every day at lunchtime. Michael had a pass to get on the lot, and we would sit at the commissary and we would eat our lunch, and Bella would nurse.
Mm.
It was sweet. It was really
Yeah.
sweet. If I wasn't so tired, I could have really appreciated it. And Michael was a trooper. Like, the commitment he made to every day, it's not that far, but every day get in the car with that baby and drive her up to work so that she could nurse at lunch.
Oh, it's
And
such a
come back up.
commitment.
Yeah.
It's hardcore.
Yeah, so it was great. It was great. Am I the kind of mother that I want to be? On the one hand, I'm modeling for my daughters living a creative life
Yes.
and being successful at it. On the other hand, I am not around for a lot of stuff. And that sucks. And I actually have an online photographic series called Bad Mother, where I document all my failings as a mother
Oh
with
my
these children.
God.
And it's my way of sort of purging myself of the guilt.
Oh.
Because, like I said, that 9-month-old wanted to be in our arms all the time. And
Yeah.
the minute she would sit for 5 minutes without being in one of our arms, I ignored her. I was so happy to have the 5 minutes that I would ignore her. And that's been sort of my parenting style throughout, which is if they seem content, ignore them.
Yeah.
And which gives me a lot of time. But then sometimes I walk into situations that probably shouldn't be happening, and if I had been paying more attention, they wouldn't be happening. For instance, one time I left the little one downstairs with her friend, they were about 2, painting at an easel, happily painting at an easel, and I came upstairs to pee. And I walked back downstairs, not 2 minutes later,
Yeah.
and they were both naked and covered head to toe in paint. And I had to grab these 2 little 2-year-olds and race them up the stairs into the tub. So those are the kinds of things that I document in this series, Bad Mother.
Is it badmother.com? What is it?
It's on my website, and it's also on Facebook, and it's called Bad Mother. The first photograph that it actually started with my little one. And then I went back into the archives of Bad Mothering to find the images of the older one. But with the
I
little,
love it so much.
the first picture that started it all was I walked upstairs from doing something else, and my 4-year-old was sitting on this table with a short skirt on and a fake fur and a wig and a ciggy in her mouth. And instead of freaking out, it was a fake cigarette, I found out later. It was a gum cigarette. Instead of freaking out, I snapped a picture and I stuck it online, and I said, "Lucky Lulu, Bad Mother." And that started the whole series, was that picture.
Oh my God.
So yeah, there's now I think 150 images.
What's the name of your website?
My name, JillDayanica.com.
I am so going to subscribe to that in 5 minutes. That is awesome.
So that's my answer for how am I doing as a parent. I don't know.
It's all a great experiment.
Exactly. I say, if I actually say as part of the artist statement for Bad Mother that I am documenting my failings as a parent while my kids run around and do whatever they want with their time, space, and bodies. And if they grow up to be happy, successful adults, I will be vindicated.
Mm-hmm.
And if they grow up to be, bank robbers, well, the court
Bad on you.
The court of public opinion can have all the evidence they need against me right here in all of these photographs.
Okay, well, I've met one of your daughters, and she seems very smart and well-adjusted and just fine.
All for her daddy. It's all from him.
Tell me this. Are you a success?
Am I a success? Mm-hmm. I think I'm super happy, so yeah, I guess I'm a success.
Are you a badass?
I don't think of myself as a badass.
What does that word mean to you?
A badass. Badass women take risks and take no prisoners and do not care what other people think when they're forging their path. And I am so in awe of badasses. I love badass women.
You've kind of done some badass things, I'm here to tell you.
I feel like always in the back of my head is the little good Italian Catholic girl who wants to make sure nobody gets upset with her.
That's in all of us, I think. Do you ever feel like an imposter?
No, but I do recognize that is a pervasive feeling that all of us, men and women, feel at one point or another. Mm-hmm. Like, how did I get here? I don't belong here. What am I going to do? It's not so much feeling like an imposter as feeling scared. And feeling like I might let myself or somebody else down. So I know in my heart that I can do what it is I'm seeking to do, or I want to believe in my heart I can do what it is I'm seeking to do, but I'm scared that it might not work. And then I have to look back on all the different things I've done through my creative lifetime.
All of your evidence.
All of my evidence in art and film and parenting, whatever it is, and go, I haven't failed yet. I've never turned in an essay late. I always show up to work on time when I have to. I haven't slept through that important meeting yet. Whatever it is. And I think to myself, okay, I've been competent until now. I've been competent and creative and sometimes really, really creative until now. So what is keeping me thinking, what is making me think
fear?
That I can't do it now?
Yeah.
And it's usually a new experience. Once you've done something over and over, you get a little bit more confidence. And so the new experiences are always the one to give you pause. Mm-hmm. And so all I can do with that new experience is to look back on the old ones and say, I did it then. Those were new experiences at one point, and I did it. And I'm going to do it this time.
And then you do.
And then I do. In my movie, one of the musicians in my movie was Xenia. She was a contestant on season 1 of The Voice. Mm-hmm. She was, I think, 15 years old when she got up on that stage. And you could see that she was shaking visibly when she was singing. She was very nervous. And the backstory they presented in the little video journal that they present on the show was that no one knew she sang. Not even her best friend knew she sang until she got accepted into The Voice.
It was like her little secret?
It was her secret. And
what a way to come out with it.
Yeah. And when I hired her for the movie, I said, can I ask you something? How does an obviously very nervous, very shy 15-year-old go from not telling anyone she's singing to being on a national television show and being a semifinalist?
Yeah.
How did you do that? And she said she decided one day that she wanted to sing more than she wanted to be afraid. And I burst into tears.
Yeah.
Because that came out of the mouth of someone who at the time was 17 years old. And she figured it out when she was 15, and some of us don't figure that out in our entire lifetime. Ever.
That's incredible.
And so I think of Xenia a lot.
Because that is it.
Yeah. I want to do this more than I want to be afraid.
That is a secret of life right there.
Yeah.
And so many people don't do it.
And it doesn't make the fear go away. She was shaking on that stage. I could see it. All of the American public watching the show could see it. She was nervous.
What courage to...
Exactly. Yeah, courage isn't no fear. Courage is, oh yeah, I'm friggin' fearful, but I'm still going to take that step.
Okay, what do you think of the state of women in this business today? Where do you think we are?
I think that depending on who you ask, they'll say, oh, you're so lucky. Everybody wants a female director these days. Some people think that the doors are just opening wide.
Oh, yeah.
And I've spent a lot of time looking at the statistics. I've been on a lot of panels, women in filmmaking, and the numbers haven't really budged, even though there's a lot of talk. So, and I do acknowledge Ryan Murphy just started HALF, where he's made the commitment that half of the people who direct his episodes have to be women or diversity hires, is what he's calling it. And
Shonda Rhimes just made the same commitment.
Shonda has made that commitment too, and I think also J.J. Abrams has made the same commitment. So when you have powerful producers, those are three of the most powerful producers in television today. When you have those powerful producers making that claim, I think things will change.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes. That's what it takes is these people that are in charge saying to the networks, these are going to be my hires, and saying to the talent agents, this is who I want to see. Send me those resumes.
What do you think the next steps are for women? What do we need to do?
Well, I think we need to support each other, and we need to continually be confident and ask for what we want. And we also need to advocate for people that are in a little more powerful position than us to be our cheerleaders and be our advocates. Because women have been knocking at the door and asking for years.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change until someone that has more power and has more responsibility can start making those changes.
How do you think we make that case?
We raise our sons to understand that women and men both have important things to say, and we hopefully surround ourselves with women and men that feel the same way, and we just make that case louder than the other. But I really do think that without powerful allies, you're knocking your head against a wall.
Yeah.
There's no way to do it as someone trying to break through unless you have allies that are further ahead on that ladder pulling you up. There's just absolutely no way. Now, that said, I think that if you are a woman filmmaker, editor, director, producer, you just have to make stuff. You just have to keep making stuff.
Just do the work.
Just do the work. And if it means, like with Maggie and I, if it means that you're planning to shoot it on your iPhone and edit it in iMovie, then that's what you're doing. Just keep doing the work.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Julie.
This was so great. You've been listening to The Other 50%. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Jill Danyenica for telling us her story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features and bios of our guests. You can also follow us on Facebook under The Other 50%, the numbers and the percentage sign, and on Twitter as @other50%. Thanks for listening. See you next time.